Okay, apparently it's 6 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. We're all ready to start. Nice to see everybody. I think we've got one or two missing. Before we actually start the meeting, I'd like to do a minute's silence for Kath Arnold, who of course sat on this committee for quite some time. It's the first opportunity we've had, so if we can just do a minute's silence, that would be absolutely lovely. Thank you. Sounds like an egg timer. So we'll start this evening with general purposes, so you've all got the right minutes in front of you. Apologies for absence. Do you have any?
Yes, Chairman, I have apologies from the Vice Chairman, Councillor White, also Councillor Brazier, Councillor Cope, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Are there any declarations from members and officers? No. Declaration of any intention to record the meeting. Of course, we are recording it and it is being live streamed. So we can move then to agenda item number 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June. Are they a true record?
Move them, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? All in favour? Thank you. So item agenda number 5 is the forward plan. Is everybody okay with the forward plan, and is there anything you'd like particularly adding on at this stage? Everybody okay with that? Thank you. So agenda item number 6, the satisfaction survey for taxi users and taxi trade, and I guess that's over to you then, Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report that brings to committee a response to a request from the committee about undertaking a satisfaction survey with users of taxis in the Newcombe and Sherwood area. In addition to that, as we were preparing this, we thought it might be useful to also seek satisfaction from the trade itself in terms of how this authority deals with it. So members will see that there are 2 suggested surveys, one for customers of taxis and one for the trade themselves. We've outlined in the proposals a broad outline of the areas we were going to cover, and in Appendix 1 and 2 there's the draft questions that we're suggesting we will ask for both of those surveys. So, Chairman, the recommendation is that members identify if they've got any further questions to add to that, to add to the survey, agree a 4-week survey period, and that it covers both the customers and the taxi trade itself, Chairman.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody got any comments on that? Yvonne.
Thank you, Chairman. While I was looking through this on Appendix 1, Alan, on page 6, there's a map of Newark and Sherwood, but it doesn't say Blidworth. Is that why we don't get anything in Blidworth? Because we're not on anybody's map?
Sorry, where are you looking?
Page 6, well, page 28, or page 6, whichever you want to look at. Local area profile.
Councillor...
You're on the gambling one.
Yeah.
This one's the taxi driver one.
I thought we'd done that.
No.
All right, okay, I'll come back to that. Trying to find it.
You get me, us all confused.
Well, it says appendix 1 and it comes after this. So why is it not in this?
Agenda item 6 we're on.
Oh, right, okay.
We'll come back.
Yeah.
So any questions or any comments on the taxi driver? It's going to, okay. One thing I'd say, and I think you're going to get some comments on the taxis on Castlegate taxi rank, my biggest bugbear. If really we do need some enforcement there on a Friday night. A couple of times I've been out, we've struggled to get a taxi. They can't get in the rank. So,
can I just check? Discuss it with you. The possibility of not retaining the taxi rank on Kirkgate, Alan. Are we in the process of dealing with it at all?
That would have to be a resolution from this committee because it's made by this committee.
So when can it be brought to the committee?
If the chairman would like it on the forward plan for next meeting, we can bring it forward then.
Yeah, but I'd like it to be discussed and decided upon. You know what it's about, Rita?
Kirkgate one.
Yes. Very little used, but used by people who nip into the market and shops close by, and we need to bring people to the town.
Yvonne,
Thank you.
did you want to come back?
On the same lines.
Oh, okay. Roger?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering if we're going to get big numbers of people doing the survey, and it says on the website, are we publicising it anywhere else so people know that the survey is actually happening and going on? You know, just to make sure we do get a good response.
Yeah, if I may, Chairman. One of our thoughts was, or considerations, is to ask each taxi to put a poster up in their taxi itself so that users can see it with where they can go online and get the survey. So we're hoping that will generate interest. We'll obviously promote it via social media channels as well. So yeah, we are hoping that we'll get a decent response. And if I just may, Chairman, in answer to Councillor Saddington and Councillor Woodhead's comment about ranks, we do ask a question in the survey about which rank they use the most, so that will feed into some of the discussion at that later date.
I saw that.
So the recommendations on page 8 agree to the undertaking of the surveys for customer satisfaction and the taxi trade, and view the survey questions and make any suggestions for amendments, and nobody's actually done that. And agree the 4-week survey period. So is everybody in favour of that? Can we move ahead on that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So then we can move on to agenda item 7, the review of the statement of gambling policy. This was last reviewed January 2019 and has to be reviewed every 3 years. So of course we're coming into that period. So Councillor Woodhead, you wanted to come in on this?
Yes, an interesting answer, Alan, on your map.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got one, unfortunately, as much as I've had time to think about it. I got the map from our colleagues in the planning policy team. What I will do is go back to them and see if we've got a more up-to-date map that does include. Is it Blidworth or Bilsthorpe? I can't recall now.
Bilsthorpe's on there.
Yeah, so Blidworth isn't.
Blidworth isn't.
I shall see if we've got a more up-to-date map.
But yeah, we are a very old village. We are mentioned in the Doomsday Book. So I think, you know, we've as much right to be on this map as any other place has. And let's say people here in Newark that have never been out to Blidworth, they wouldn't know it was there, would they?
Oh, but we do.
Oh, because your members.
Well, those that live there know it's there.
Yes, it's a good job we do.
At least we're going to look at it for you, Councillor Woodhead, and we'll...
It's not a typing error, I can assure you.
Just
Councillor
It's a
Walker?
blank.
Yes, Chairman. On the same lines, actually, because I can't see East Stoke, I can't see Farndon, I can't see... sorry, Farndon's on, but East Stoke, Elston, Alberton, Kilvington, Staunton, Thorpe, Horton, none of those are on.
Balderton's not on.
Oh, we're not bothered about Balderton, but I'm just talking about... In other words, the map's rubbish.
Yeah, suffice to say, I think Alan said that he will look into this, and I'm sure he'll put a more up-to-date map on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't promise everywhere will be on there, but I will try and meet the needs of members.
So moving on from the map, are there any comments on the policy that you want to say at the moment? I think Alan's not done his bit yet.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I mean, as you said at the outset, this is a policy we have to refresh every 3 years. The process we follow is that the draft policy comes to this committee, we go out to consultation, and one of the appendices in the draft policy will outline the suggested list of consultees. We get those on this policy, we get very few comments normally. There may be some from the gambling trade, but normally not very many. We bring those comments back to committee to decide if we want to amend the policy in any way, and then this committee recommends it to full council if they're happy with it, because it has to be adopted by full council rather than this committee. So the timescale we're looking at is go out to consultation now, bring the consultation comments back to general purposes in November, and then go to full council at its meeting following the general purposes meeting in November, which I think is early December, ready for adoption in January, which is the legal date that we have to do it by. Just in terms of an update, Chairman, we've changed the policy very little this year. It had a fundamental change 3 years ago to include some details about the local area profile, and we've updated it slightly this year. And for those that are looking at electronic copies, some of it is in red, which highlights where we've changed it. For those that aren't, we've changed some substantial bits from 1.2 onwards, just to give a bit more clarity to what the gambling licensing framework allows us to do. So we've updated paragraphs 1.21 onwards through to 1.25. And then on the local area profile that Councillor Woodhead's pointed out about the map, we've included a bit more information about the district as well, just to give that little bit more detail about what happens in Newark and Sherwood. We haven't changed any of the policies that have previously been agreed. So the policies that are further down in the report that are in bold and are set out as policies for this committee, we've made no changes to those whatsoever. So it's really just some of the background detail in the policy that we've amended this year, rather than fundamentally changing anything. So I wouldn't think we'll get a lot of comments back, but we'll bring whatever we get back to this committee, Chairman.
Councillor Wargles.
Chair, just to section 5.18 casinos and 5.18.1, sorry, which you've got highlighted in the electronic copy in yellow. Are those dates requiring changing in there? Because obviously it says there's a 3-year policy which will expire in 2022. So I'm guessing those dates in that need amending.
Yeah, thank you. I should have touched on that. So within the Gambling Act itself, there is a resolution that a local authority can adopt whereby they don't wish to be considered by, it was the Department of Culture, whatever, wherever that department sits now, whereby if there's ever any opportunity for casino licence to be issued, local authorities can exclude themselves from being asked to house a casino. This authority has normally voted not to adopt that resolution, if that makes so, not to have a casino in effect, in simple terms. And yes, we will be that will be a discussion point at the next November meeting to decide whether we want to recommend, or this committee wants to recommend to full council, the adoption of that resolution. And like I say, in the past, full council has always voted not to have a casino in Newark and Sherwood. Although there was some debate, as I recall, 3 years ago about whether that was still the policy we ought to adopt.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I was just wondering, most of the gambling problems or issues these days seems to be online gambling, but I don't suppose we have any control over that whatsoever, do we?
We don't, unfortunately. Some online gambling is controlled by the Gambling Commission, who are our partners in licensing and controlling gambling. A lot of gambling sites are housed offshore, so they don't fall into anyone's control. an awful lot have signed up to the sort of voluntary responsible gambling controls, and you'll note that, I mean, if you watch TV, you can't get away from the gambling adverts that come on between certain channels, in particular when football's on. But they are always promoting this responsible gambling approach that most of them have. There are still some ways to go with that, and it's not perfect, but it is a step forward. But in terms of controls, we are very limited when it comes to online gambling.
Councillor Woodhead?
Anything else? So,
There's no way for us to do it. The gambling sites are required to monitor themselves, which, you know, you take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, I'm afraid. You're right, it is very simply people self-certifying whether they're over the age of 18. They may be, they may be not. They may have got hold of someone else's credit card, etc., as you've just described. What should happen, though, is if the and the gambling companies have a lot of computer software behind the scenes looking at the patterns of people's gambling, whether they lose a lot of money or bet a lot of money in a short space of time, etc. So they should if there are any patterns that flag up dangerous behaviour in terms of losing lots of money very quickly, lots of different cards being used on the same account, things should be in place to flag that up to the company themselves for them to either blank that account or to put some other safeguards in place. As I've said, it's not perfect, but they are scrutinised by the Gambling Commission where they're a bona fide company, online company in this country. But as I said, there are some offshore companies that aren't registered in this country. But that is part of this responsible gambling charter that a lot of the companies have signed up to. And I know government are taking a lot of interest in online gambling, but responsible gambling across the whole gambling industry, whether it be bingo halls, whether it be betting shops or gaming machines, and the amount of controls that I think we'll see being increased over the next few years will undoubtedly try to control some of this.
thank you, Chair. Are the banks included in this? Because if I lose my credit card and somebody's using my card for whatever purpose, gambling, spending on anything at all, would my bank have anything to do with it? Would they be able to inform me that there's been activity or something like that?
They may. I don't know the answer, but I would think that, again, the banks have fairly sophisticated software to identify certain patterns with the use of cards, etc., particularly online, the use of cards online. So it may be that if they felt that there was some unusual activity, i.e. gambling with a card, they may put a stop on that card and notify the owner. But I don't know that categorically. I'm just suggesting that is part of the technology that banks have anyway in terms of card use and identifying strange websites or unusual patterns. So there may be, but I don't think they're joined up with the gambling industry on making sure that the two are combined. Not unless there's underage gambling in fixed premises or underage or the cards have been stolen or used fraudulently.
Alan's correct where the banks are concerned. Having worked in that industry, they are monitoring, and if it's unusual activity on your account, they will generally contact you, and you'll know they've contacted you rather than a message come up on your phone that you're never sure about. and they actually ask you if you've actually spent that money, and then they deal with it. So it does work, or that's the way it's supposed to work, but it does work. Okay, any other comments? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just wondering, in the context of our own lottery that we run as an authority, is there any ramifications for that we would have to amend, or is that just a sort of a straightforward one if we approve this tonight?
Mr. Chairman, no implications for ourselves. When we were looking at setting up the lottery, we got advice from both the Gambling Commission and an agent who was helping us set it up. So yeah, no implications for us.
Any other comments before we move to the recommendation? No? Thank you. Everybody in favour? Thank you. So the next agenda item is the update on performance and enforcement matters. So as Nicola's on holiday, I guess it's Alan again.
It is, Chairman. Not a lot of activity to report for the first quarter of this year, mainly because of the pandemic and the lack of activity both in the taxi trade and the charity trade. Little bit of detail there around the enforcement we did in terms of taxes, and then the returns for the house collections. And I'll draw members' attention to the percentage return to the charity, with all four being over the 85% that we recommend. So that's always positive. And then from 2.5, the enforcement details, Chairman.
Any comments on that report? No? Okay, so we can now move on to the next part, which of course is an exempt part. Now, if anybody's wishing to comment on that, can you please indicate, because we'll need to take it to the end of the licensing committee because of taking the live streaming off. They're attached to this. Ah, I have. Anybody online got the?
Chairman, through you, Helen, I think everyone else must have the problem that I had with mine by the sound of it.
Yeah, if I could just say that unless you're actually registered for the exempt app, the restricted items app, then you won't see them. You'll only get the open version. So
what we can do then, in that case then, is we can just run through it at the end of licensing when we can take the live streaming off.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Is this page 67 on?
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have a look at it at the end. Quite. We'll come back to that bit then. You'll have to remind me, I'll probably forget. So that will actually conclude the general purposes bit until we move on to the exempt item at the end of licensing. So if we can now then move on to the licensing committee. Any declarations of interest from members and officers? As you know, we're actually live streaming, so it is being recorded. Minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June. Are they a true record? Okay. All in favour? All those who are present? Okay. And the agenda item number 4 is the forward plan. Is everybody okay with that? Obviously, through the time there'll be other bits that go on it, but there are a couple of there where the next meeting we're hoping to have the Pub Watch chairman come and just give us a quick chat, and then later on, with a bit of luck, we'll get a representative from the police authority as well. So agenda item number 5 is review of the pool of conditions. Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Any members who have sat on licensing hearings will be aware that part of the documentation we produce to assist members is the pool of potential conditions, which is an agreed set of conditions that we've agreed county-wide that members can use to attach to any decision that they make, and these conditions are written in an enforceable way and cover generally all the aspects that members may want to put on to any license, to any premises license. It's been a while since these were updated and reviewed, and following a request at the last hearing, what we're proposing now is that we take these conditions to the Notts Authorities licensing group to look at again reviewing them across the county, make any amendments that we see fit based on the past 3 years learning, any updates on case law that may reflect on how we want the conditions to be worded, and then to bring that draft document back here for approval in terms of support for those conditions to be the pool of conditions that Newcombe and Sherwood use. Just to remind members, we don't have standard conditions because that's not what we're allowed to have, but we have this pool of conditions from which members can select and attach to licenses as and when required, rather than attaching them as a standard condition. We do have the mandatory conditions, which we are required to attach by law, but these are the discretionary conditions that members can add following any panel hearing. That's all I need to say, Chair.
Any comments tonight on the conditions, Councillor Wargos?
Yeah, just one. On page 11, number 4, public nuisance noise. I know it's a condition you can apply, but is there any thoughts been given to the impact of COVID? Because obviously, once you shut all your windows and doors, your ventilation issues are going to be a problem potentially in pubs. And I was just wondering whether there was any leeway for that to be either relaxed or changed under the circumstances we're in.
If I may, Chairman, that's a good point. And whilst a fair number of our premises licences have this condition attached to them, you're quite right. In the current past 18 months, where hospitality has been open, where noise has been a problem, there has been a assessment of whether doors and windows being open as accounted for that or added to it, and there's normally a local discussion in terms of what else can be done, because it is a compromise, as you quite rightly say, between the amenity of the local residents and the safety of people within the premises. I think we would still recommend as officers that condition stays in the potential pool, but you're right, there has to be some common sense in terms of how it's enforced in the current circumstances.
Any other comments? Councillor Woodhead?
Yeah, what about fireworks at these places? Are they regulated? I'm asking because there were fireworks going off in Blidworth last night after 11 o'clock. Perhaps the drugs had arrived.
So that's an interesting point, because there's 2 or 3 premises that have just requested some fireworks for weddings and various other things. There are some premises licences that have a condition attached with regard to fireworks, sometimes limiting the number of times they can have them per year, and limiting the times they can have them. In terms of legally, fireworks can be discharged any time before 11 p.m. on any day of the year, and after 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve and November the 5th. So whilst I don't think we have a standard, not a standard condition, a model condition for fireworks, perhaps that is something we need to consider, because I think they are becoming more popular. As I've said, we've had 2 or 3 instances in the last few days where some of our licensed premises have asked that question.
Councillor Saddington?
Yes, I would agree with that, Alan, because the fireworks are increasing, and I think we need to be very mindful of our, well, if I say rural, Yvonne won't agree with me, but the rural areas do have horses, and they are often out at night. and if they're not aware of, if the people who own the horses aren't aware of it, they could be spooked. So I think there should be some regulation, and if people are going to have fireworks and they know they've got horses nearby, they should notify the people who own the horses. It's only right and fair.
Any other comments? Because this is going out to consultation, and we will get a chance to discuss this again before it gets passed. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah, that's right. So what we'll do is we'll seek, like I say, the NOTS Authorities Licensing Group to have comments on this. We'll review the conditions, and then we'll come back, and members will get an opportunity to agree or comment on them, Chairman.
Have we got a timescale or date on that, Alan? Because of course there's not been any meetings for such. Or are you still meeting and not the chairman and vice chairman? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so the recommendation there is obviously to support the review of the pool conditions and to identify any areas that we feel any additional conditions may be developed. So we've got a couple there, and if there's any more, we will have a chance to do that again. So is everybody okay with that? Thank you. Update on pub watch schemes in Newark and Sherwood before Alan comes in. I'll just say that I do attend from time to time the Newark one, and I've got plans on visiting Southwell and Blidder. It is Blidder, no, Ollerton. When I can, because it is quite interesting to learn how the pubs are coping. When I was there last week, they did come up with a sheet which listed the actual sanctions. I was going to go through it, but I thought, well, if Paul's coming to the next meeting, it's something that Paul can actually go through when he gives an update from their perspective, actually, on Pub Watch. But so that should be quite interesting. And something to add that I don't know whether Alan knows, that when you're looking at the scheme link section of it, they did actually last week take 3 off, I think. Could have even been 4 for non-attendance at Pub Watch. They have to attend 9 out of 12, and of course they're encouraged to attend every one. So that was quite interesting as well. So Alan, have you got anything to add on that?
Nothing greatly more than in the report, Chairman. I think I'll make a comment that when we did this report, I think it was last year, we did have a small but active pub watch group in Blidworth, but that hasn't been able to sustain itself, potentially due to the pandemic. Sometimes it's a change of personnel, because they are groups that are managed by the premises themselves. We don't, while we offer support to them and we attend them, we don't manage the groups. They are run by the trade themselves, so they are dependent to some extent on a motivated, committed local person who wants that group to succeed. In Southwell we currently have that, and that's really going well at the minute. Blidworth, we used to have that, we no longer have that, and the group's folded. But these things are in peaks and troughs, so it may come back. And just on the scheme link, we are pushing ahead with Southwell to come onto that mobile app, which again will assist them in their sharing of information.
Councillor Walker?
Having been to a number of these pub watch meetings, where it's got the chairman and vice chairman are invited to any of the meetings, I would like to see chairman and a member of this committee, because I think it would be very interesting for members of this committee to go to a pub watch meeting.
I think if you recall, Councillor Walker, we did discuss that at a couple of meetings ago, and as the pub watchers literally were talking about giving them a set of, an agenda when we can actually get that set up. That's not been done yet, and I think we agreed that we'd wait until that was in place, until they were actually running properly, and then see what we could do to get other members present. It certainly wouldn't help to have a load of us there, because you've been, as you've said, when you were vice chairman, And I think that would be too onerous on the actual pubs.
Oh yeah, I was thinking the chairman would go plus one other member of the committee, so there'd still only be two. Instead of chairman and vice chairman, it's chairman and a member of this committee, or the vice chairman and a member of this committee.
Yeah, we can look into that, Ivor, and I think it's something we can do because I know Councillor White can't always attend anyway, so that would actually be good to see two of us present. But if you just bear with us at the moment until we can get that all sorted, that would be absolutely great. Thank you. Councillor Saddington.
Just coming back on something similar to that, but I don't think it was Pub Watch. I don't know what it was. Years ago, we met at, it was quite an experience. We met at the police station and we took a trip around all the pubs in Newark. It was quite an experience, actually. Quite an eye-opener. Now, pardon?
Did we have to carry you out?
No, you jolly well didn't. But
Clean the floors in one or two premises.
But it was very, very interesting, that walk around that evening. And I think the police accompanied it. It was a very interesting and worthwhile evening. And we've got several new members on this committee now. And I think it would be probably an idea, not necessarily as winter's coming up, but sometime for us to do that again, because I think it was well worthwhile.
That again is something I've actually had a word with Alan about recently, and I think Alan's in agreement that we'll get something sorted. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it, and as you say, it's very useful for members to see premises that they perhaps won't frequent as part of their non-member life. Takes a bit of organising because clearly, depending on how many members want to be there, we have to have support from the police, and so their nighttime economy staff have to be on duty. I think this year poses a bit more of a challenge, both in terms of the risk to members in terms of going into busy premises, hospitality just only beginning to not being open that long and get back on its feet. But if we're looking at next year, Chairman, I think sometime between Christmas and Easter maybe an opportunity.
Slightly lighter nights.
Yeah.
Any other comments from anybody? Okay. Well, the recommendation is to support Pub Watch and make the workings of Pub Watch more effective and efficient. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you. So the next item is pavement licences, Alan.
Chairman, you recall that about a year ago now, the Business and Planning Act was enacted, which gave local authorities the power to issue pavement licence, which is something that districts have never had. It was always a county council function as part of their role as highways authority to support the hospitality trade coming out of the first national lockdown last year. The new act was brought in to generally give a more streamlined and local approach to the issue of pavement licences, with the hope that there'd be a lot more outside areas and hospitality would be able to support themselves better by having more area. I'm not sure that's really come to fruition, partly because we went into lockdowns 2 and 3, which didn't help, but also because the weather in this country doesn't always lend itself to seating outside. So the actual uptake of pavement licences in Newark and Sherwood, as I've outlined in the report, has been fairly low. We've had a small number of applications, some that we've granted and we were happy to grant, some that we've had to go back and say they're not suitable, others that weren't valid applications for various reasons. So whilst I think the principle of what the government were trying to achieve by bringing these in hasn't really been matched with the take up on the ground. Originally the payment licences were supposed to run till September this year. It has now been extended. The powers in the Act to allow us to do it has been extended for a further 12 months. But we've seen no increased take-up this year, even following you know, the ability for hospitality only to trade outside through through April, May and June, we saw no real increase in the take-up of these. So I'm not sure we'll see a lot more take-up over the next year, Chairman.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not against payment licence. I think where the weather's right, it's nice to have. But could we have a list of which premises have applied for payment licence? Because I think from Alan, or is there one there? Have I missed it? No.
I've not listed the premises. I think I've broadly listed the areas.
Yeah, it's just that I think there's probably more premises do it than you actually realise.
There are, and if I may, there are, but some of those have got licences from the county because the two schemes are running side by side. Although they brought this in for the districts, the county scheme that had been in existence for many years still stayed in existence. So there is still an ability to go through the county council and have a licence through them. And some of the premises in Newark town centre have done that. So we don't have overall control. And the other, as I've discussed with the chairman, the other failing of this legislation is that it didn't make it an offence to put chairs on a pavement and carry on without a licence. So you could do that and just carry on anyway, and we didn't have any powers to stop that. So it was all, I think, because it was a bit of a rush through to try and get support hospitality. There were some flaws in it, unfortunately.
Well, I think from that, Chairman, we ought to be just tidying this one up a bit. If two councils are running a parallel scheme, and nobody really knows what's happening and whether it's legislative, they can do it with or without. I think we need to just having some detail of what can't be done, and whether, you know, after this year's trial, whether it reverts back to a county council licensing thing or it comes solely to the district. I think running two in parallel is it's silly, basically.
Councillor Saddington.
Well, I was coming along the same lines as Roger, really. It makes the whole system a little bit academic. If you've got pavement licences being given by the county, pavement licences being given by the district, or no licences at all, and they're just putting chairs out. I think, as Roger said, it needs tidying up, and a list needs to be put forward. Otherwise, how can you check who's got a licence? I mean, you wouldn't have a clue. So it does make the whole system a bit academic, as far as I can see.
My note said no enforcement, waste of time.
Absolutely.
But I think it's something that you've looked into, haven't you, Alan, with the
Yeah,
council?
in fact, I'll just clarify what I said. I'm going to correct, but I'll clarify what I said. The district council hasn't got any enforcement, but the county can still enforce against anybody, as they've always been allowed to. And members of this committee will recall that we've had a number of reports going back 18 months around pavement licences in Newark when only the county council were allowed to issue them. So we knew who'd got them, who hadn't, and we were seeking enforcement from the county or an approach from the county to work with us to try and legalise and tidy up those licences that we'd currently got. And we did a lot of work with the county council on that, to be overtaken a little bit by the pandemic. For the next year, it is going to be messy, undoubtedly, because we've got the provisions that we're allowed to deal with pavement licences with. The county have still got their provisions. I think when we come out the other side of the pandemic next September, in terms of payment licence that we're allowed to issue, then it will begin to clear itself up again, because there'll only be one. I don't think this act will stay in place. There'll only be the county council again able to issue them, so we should be able to get on a level footing in terms of where we are and what's happening.
If I can just come back on that, if the county are the enforcers, then if we don't have a list from district, if they don't have a list from district who we have given licences to, then they can't enforce, can they?
Well, so we always consult with the county, with one of the statutory consultees if we get an application. We then tell county if we've issued a licence. They clearly won't be enforcing on any licence we've issued. They will be enforcing on premises that don't have a licence. in theory, hopefully, which is something we can't do as a district because we don't have that power. So I think it's probably a bit clearer than I made it sound, I think, because we know, they know what we've issued, which isn't many, as I've set out in the report. We don't always know what they've issued because we're not a statutory consultee for the county, but we have reasonable relationships with their officers, so yeah, we can generally find that out. But undoubtedly it is messy. I don't hide behind that in any way, but it should clear itself up as we move forward.
We can keep an eye on it anyway, but as Alan said, we've got to, what do you say, next September before that runs out. We'll see what happens then. So it's for noting that report. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So we can now move on to the item that interested the advertiser last week in the paper, the nitrous oxide issues on licensed premises.
Thank you, Chairman. I've set out in the report a little bit of background about nitrous oxide and what it is, why it's used, and to some extent the fact that it's illegal. You know, the use of the purchase and the use of it is legal, which is a challenge for the police and ourselves. In terms of this committee's interest in terms of licensed premises, certainly our research and the way that nitrous oxide is used certainly leads me to the belief that it isn't an issue in licensed premises. It isn't the sort of drug that you can use, and I'll use the word drug or substance, maybe might be a better use. It isn't the sort of substance you can use in licensed premises surreptitiously. You have to inhale it. Normally, it comes in the little aluminium cylinders that many of you will have seen in all parts of the district, and you have to discharge that into a balloon normally, and then breathe the nitrous oxide into that balloon. It's not something you can do surreptitiously in the corner of a pub very easily. So certainly when our licensing staff have been speaking to licensed premises, there's really been no issues around them believing that this is taking place in their premises. The police have never raised it as an issue with us, and we've never had many complaints or any complaints from the public with regard to this. It's more an activity that takes place in the open air, and again I'll make the comment that many of you may have seen the little aluminium cylinders in our car parks, on pieces of open land, because generally young people gather together as a group to inhale it, get that high that they get from it, and then drive away. It is an offence to drive under the influence of nitrous oxide, and that is something the police try to enforce wherever they can, but clearly catching these people is a bit of a challenge, and it's not always obvious that they are under that influence. But in terms of purchasing them, you can buy them online quite easily. Using them, there are no legal powers to stop that. Chairman.
Chairman, there's a fair few being used if 100 have been found in the Riverside car park. And also on Victoria Street in Yurt, there's been a number of incidents.
If you look at 2.12, it does say the cleansing team have reported a downturn. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good sign that there's not as many.
But there have been a number.
You will often find, Chairman, that in one location there are very large numbers. Now, I can say hand on heart, I've never used it, so I don't know how much you need. I don't know how much you need to get the experience that you're searching for. But yeah, it's not unusual to find 50, 60, over 100 all together. And normally that might be 4, 5, 6 individuals over a period of time using them. So yeah, that we do find them in large numbers, but in smaller, in a reduced number of locations over the past year.
Anybody got any other comments?
A couple of years ago, must have had a vehicle parked in the top of my yard because one morning there was about 20, 30 been thrown out on the side.
So you had to clear them up. Any other comments? It is another report for noting, so if everybody's okay with that, we can move on. Okay. So agenda item 9 is the minutes of the licensing hearing for the Dapper Spaniel. It's all there if you want it. Any comments? No? It was a fairly straightforward hearing, I think. I think Councillor Jackson will agree. Yeah.
If I just make a
Yeah.
comment, Joe, I wasn't at the hearing, but just since the licence has been issued, there have been a number of complaints from residents about noise from the beer garden and the premises themselves that we are currently investigating. I know they've made some changes to the beer garden in terms of live music and the time that it's used to try and solve that problem, but investigations are ongoing, Chairman.
So are they claiming that it was beyond, I think, was it 7 o'clock? We said it had got to stop on 5 o'clock at the weekend? I recall, something like that. Yeah. So I'm presuming, have they played beyond that, or?
I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know the details, Chairman. It may have been before that, but very loud, or it may have been after that. But I have the feeling, in terms of the complaint that was made about the music outdoors, they have done some further work to try and resolve that. But I do know the investigation is ongoing.
Okay, so we can now move on then to the update on performance and enforcement matters, agenda item number 10. You again, are you?
Yes, Chairman,
You'll
thank
have
you.
to tell Nicola off for not doing that.
I know, she's not going to leave again. So this sets out, in 2.1, it sets out the administration of applications that we've received. And I think it's fair to say that throughout last year and this year, we've seen very little turn down in terms of the number of license applications and variations we've seen. In fact, this year we've had probably more hearings than we've had for a long time. So activity within the licensing trade has been very buoyant in terms of new premises licenses, changes to premises licenses. The one thing we have seen a downturn in, and members will be aware, is the use of temporary event notices for smaller events, because they've clearly not been allowed to take place, but there's been no demand for those over the past 18 months or so. We then move on to 2.3, which is the enforcement activity. A lot of this reflects enforcement activity during the lifting of restrictions, when there was just outside hospitality allowed, and then the move towards indoor hospitality towards the end of this reporting period. Hopefully we've given enough detail for members to understand what's been happening, but if there are any questions, Chairman, I'll try and answer them.
Councillor Jackson.
As I recall, Chairman, and I had a discussion with the owner himself, he stopped the use of the marquee, opened up the marquee to comply, certainly after we'd been either the second or third time and we were close to issuing the fixed penalty for him. So it did become compliant, because our argument was that people weren't allowed indoor. It was outdoor hospitality that was permitted by the regulations, to reduce the risk of spread of COVID, obviously. And having a marquee with all the sides down, or even two-thirds of the sides down, you may as well have sat them inside, because it was an indoor space by all descriptions. So we took quite a hard line in terms of marquees that weren't compliant, and members will no doubt see further down that we issue a fixed penalty to one premises in Alderton that wouldn't comply. But in terms of Councillor Jack, I think from memory, I think he complied once we'd had that discussion with him, or that very forthright discussion with him.
Councillor Wargos.
Chair, Alan, just for my information, how much is a fixed penalty notice?
For that offence, it was £1,000, reduced to £500 if paid within 14 days. Subsequently, every fixed penalty after that was doubled. So if you'd issued the first one, even if they'd complied or paid it, if you had to issue a second one, it was £2,000 with the subsequent half price within the 14 days.
Any other comments from anybody?
Yes, Chairman.
Michael?
If I could make a comment, not a question, just connected to this report. If the local media like reporting on the activities of the council's licensed premises, I think it's very sad they couldn't also report on what a tremendous achievement has been made by the majority, especially those within the ward which I represent in the rural area, those who went that extra mile to look after their communities in their hour of need during this pandemic. And I may also say did so before the pandemic arrived. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I absolutely agree with you. Really do. And to the officers that have had to go out and visit the premises and guide them, because it has been a difficult time and not always very straightforward to any of them. So, yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so we can then move on to agenda item number 11, which is temporary event notices. And of course, at the moment, there's not a huge amount there. I guess it's all going to get loads in the next report, maybe.
There's certainly been an increase, and a welcome increase in terms of activity for those communities, and particularly the rural communities. I mean, I've made comment before about how many we get compared to some of the other authorities in the county. A lot of that is to do with the fact that a lot of our rural communities have small events that they support, and hopefully, the Q2 report and onwards will show that we're beginning to get those communities back on their feet, and then certainly in response to what Councillor Michael's just said, we're doing our best to support those through to ensuring that we can do our best to support them to make sure that they can get back up and running.
The report is for noting. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. So that concludes the licensing committee agenda. So we now are going to go back to general purposes. So I think I've got to read this bit first.
Yes, Chairman, if you read the bit, and then when members have voted on it, I'll stop the screen.
Thank you. So this is for the exempt and confidential item, exclusion of the press and public. To consider resolving that under section 100A, in brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Is everybody in favour of that? Please show. That's unanimous, thank you.